first piece I chose to reflect on was The Forgotten Children of Ukraine, which was about the Ukrainian social system for children with disabilities, the themes of which resonated with me as a support worker. The next was a TED Talk playlist for inclusive leadership, which talked about the importance of having a vision and purpose, gender equality in power positions, and challenging biases by creating relationships. I believe it's important to harness the skills of all human resources available as a leader. The third was a speech given at the World Federation of Occupational Therapy this year. She spoke about occupational therapy from a global perspective and emphasised the importance of considering the impact of the historical context, which I chose as I'll be experiencing cultural differences with different histories when I go and prac both here in Australia and in India. And the last was 2 podcasts about inspiring ownership and getting unstuck. It considered the essential concepts such as autonomy, purpose, trust, and emotional agility, which these concepts pertain specifically to CBT, as ownership is one of the key principles of the longevity of a project. So what did I learn? The video changed my perspective on how much impact an OT can have on a person's environment. I felt an overwhelming amount of frustration at the social system that was impacting on these children. And while studying OT and as a disability support worker as well, I only ever considered myself as being able to impact the person's immediate environment, like their physical environment or even their social environment. But after watching this video, I began to think about how if you could impact the institutional or cultural environment, it would have a far greater impact on these children and on more children. When I began to look at the CMOP, and whenever we've applied it in the past, we've only ever considered the physical and social to be adaptable and somewhat within our control, and the institutional and cultural environments were always considered some unchanging influence on our practice. But after watching the video and seeing how the system has such an impact on their lives, I re-examined the CMOP from a community-based perspective, and I now understand how these two elements of the environment can be changeable. Through programs and legislation and advocacy at a higher level, the social attitudes and institutional environment can slowly be influenced, and that's where the importance of CBT and community comes in. So in one of the speeches through the TED Talk playlist, the lady was talking about how women often take a backseat when it comes to leadership, which when I consider my own experiences, that's exactly what I tend to do. So I was thinking about in such a female-dominated profession like occupational therapy, I'm going to be the one who's going to have to advocate for myself, for my clients, and for my profession as a whole. And I became more aware of how much it's going to be my responsibility to create an environment in which all the people or human resources are going to be able to thrive, which is what's going to create successful teams and successful projects. I think that to be able to do this, I need to become more aware of my own biases, which I consider myself quite an unbiased person and quite accepting, but there's still situations where I know I'm not like that, so I need to be able to create relationships with people so that I'm able to break down those barriers and biases and really be able to communicate my purpose and my why of doing things, which is something that I quite often struggle with. The speech at the WFOT conference about OT from a global historical perspective gave me insights into just how much history and cultural history impacts upon occupation. I realised that failing to ensure that I have a good knowledge of the cultural history of a place where I'm working means, even with the best of intention, I'm risking bringing harm to the people that I'm trying to enable. In December, I'll be travelling to India as a part of Go Global, and I realised that I don't know very much about the culture or the cultural history or the social issues or strengths. And I assumed that I would learn about those things while I was over there, but I now realise that it's something that I need to actively go and learn about as a part of working ethically to bring non-maleficence. Also in Australia, I realise that I need to know more about the shared cultural history of the Indigenous people and the residual inequalities that continue to disadvantage them today. So after watching this speech, that's what my goal is to go and learn. So I watched 2 podcasts about ownership and getting unstuck, which are both essential concepts for CBT. To create ownership, they talk about needing to be able to do storytelling, vision, and strategy, being able to make connections for people between small actions and big outcomes. I thought about how I might be able to use these concepts when I go on prac in December in India, and how whatever changes we might want to make would have to come with the ownership of the community if we hope for any lasting impact. The concept of emotional agility is also something that I'm going to be practicing consciously before and during my prac, as I've already been warned about the culture shock and how some things that I might see I might have a strong emotional response to. By making an effort to notice these emotions as signs and treat them with curiosity and kindness, I'll be able to be more effective and reflexive during my time on prac. I think after reflecting on all of these, my biggest takeaway is that if I want to be able to achieve my goals and help as many people as I can in my career as an OT, I'm going to have to change my strategy and think about myself from a more political perspective, and think about myself as a political influencer, as someone who has the capability to make the higher level changes that are going to impact the most amount of people, rather than smaller, more physical impact.